I'm Joanna Underwood. I'm the founder of Energy Vision. We're very, very happy and pleased to be here. I'll mention also that we have a great lineup of speakers, and we hope you will go away knowing more about what we can do right now to meet the 2030 goal of 30% methane reduction. If Energy Vision can be of greater help to you, please let us know. And thank you all for being here. Congressman?
Thank you. Thank all of you for being here for this important meeting. I'm Jim Costa. I represent the wonderful people of the 21st Congressional District. Tulare County produces more milk than the state of Wisconsin. Think about that. One county in California. We are probably the most regulated dairy industry in the country because of the desires that Californians have to try to deal with waste stream issues, particulate matters of 10 microns or less. Approximately a quarter of our dairies now in California have some form of digesters, and sometimes dairies that are adjacent to one another partner in digester facilities because it makes sense and it's good economics and it helps reduce your waste stream besides controlling the methane. So it's like win-win-win. I've introduced legislation that if you don't know about, please learn about it because we need your support. It's called Converting Our Waste Sustainability Act, otherwise known as CALS, a bipartisan bill that would create new manure management conservation program to improve air quality. I'm really honored to be here to work with you, Michael Lerner, Matt Tomac of the Energy Vision for hosting this event because we need to build on this. And each and every one of you not only are passionate, but you're leaders. You're leaders and you have an opportunity to make a difference. And we want to work with you to, in fact, ensure that we can make progress because we can.
I actually started a new position as senior advisor at the U.S. Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Office, where I'm continuing to work on what we call non-CO2 climate forcers. And so today I want to talk a little bit about the methane opportunity. We're at a point right now where the amount of methane that we're putting into the atmosphere is higher than anything ever on record. The last 5 years in particular have been record highs for the increase of the amount of methane in the atmosphere. Methane emissions from human activities are now contributing to around 30% of the warming that we're experiencing today. That's second only to carbon dioxide, which is the largest slice on this pie, which is nearly half of today's warming. And then when we look at the future and what could potentially happen in the absence of further action is that we could nearly double our methane emissions. And methane emissions primarily come from agriculture, energy, and waste. Now, the good news here is that while this is a serious problem, it is largely solvable. We have a lot of solutions already available for all these different sectors to cut methane emissions by very large amounts. And so if we look at projections of where we think methane emissions will be globally in 2030, well, we think we have available technologies to cut those emissions in half. And you can see that a lot of the emissions reductions are coming from the energy sector and waste. And for the energy sector in particular, around half of those cuts that we think we could achieve are very affordable, near zero cost, pay for themselves. So that is a very low-hanging fruit. And just a side note that even if we decarbonize as fast as we can and get off of oil and gas and coal, there still is a really meaningful opportunity to limit these methane emissions alongside that decarbonization path. We will have a better climate outcome if we do that. So we don't want to just wait for, not using fossil fuels anymore in order to solve this methane problem. Reducing methane is the single fastest way to slow down warming because methane doesn't stick around in the atmosphere very long. And so that 30% of warming that we're experiencing today from methane is basically from methane emissions from the past decade or two. That's it. So the moment we stop replenishing the atmosphere with methane, we can almost immediately reduce its warming impact. It can also help human health because when the methane does break down in the atmosphere, well, it turns into tropospheric ozone. It forms tropospheric ozone through atmospheric chemistry pathways. And tropospheric ozone, also a greenhouse gas, but also a toxic air pollutant that is very harmful for human health. It's also harmful for food security. It damages plants. So by reducing methane, we reduce ozone, which helps human health, helps food security. We also can help energy security. And then finally, it can provide high quality jobs. And all of this combined can help the most vulnerable populations. And thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Well, I am the chief cat herder and president of Energy Vision, a New York City-based national environmental research group. Our mission at the end of the day is quite simple: to use the tools we have, research skills, communication skills, to be able to first understand the challenges, but to then take that research and go out and really advance these solutions in the real world. And that means a lot of collaboration with government and industry and other partners. We've been sort of looking at this particular topic for the better part of 15 years in terms of organic waste as not only a challenge in terms of climate and public health, but as a resource for generating renewable electricity and recovering nutrients and putting this material to productive use and really changing the paradigm around this being waste and really seeing it as a resource. Our latest report, which is really taking data, particularly EPA data, but USDA data as well. And we embarked on this extensive research exercise largely because of this growing emphasis on methane, recognition, the need to address methane. As some or most of you may know, a lot of the emphasis over the past several years has been the oil and gas sector. And of course, that is a critical component of any methane mitigation strategy. We wanted to know, compared to oil and gas measures, including those on the books now, how does deployment of anaerobic digesters in particular stack up? This slide here just gives key takeaways, a lot more detail and data behind this. But really what we found is, based on existing technology, based on known sort of feedstocks, whether that's agricultural, whether that's municipal, there is the opportunity to deploy close to 5,000 new digester systems across the country, across these different waste streams. In doing so, based on some conservative estimates on leakage, we calculated that this would get us about 14% of the way to the 30% by 2030 goal. And putting some hard numbers, big picture, estimates suggest close to $75 billion in capital, but important to note that the private sector, and you'll hear more from Suzanne and Kevin about this, is poised and lining up to deploy these dollars. So it's not suggesting that the government needs to allocate $75 billion to enable this. It's really sort of supportive mechanisms that continue to pave the way for private sector expertise and capital. So, this strategy alone, plus oil and gas measures, based on our research, essentially gets us to the 30% goal and beyond. But time is of the essence. In partnership, or rather collaboration with Argonne National Lab, we've tracked deployment of operational and under development facilities producing renewable natural gas, many of them digesters. From 2014, when we started, roughly 40 facilities. As of end of last year, well over 400 either operating or under construction. So we have seen a significant uptick in this infrastructure, but a fraction of what's potentially available. and what needs to happen in order to ensure we stay on track. The outputs of these digesters is biogas, which is primarily methane. It can be utilized directly on site for purposes like generating heat and power. If you clean it up, remove CO2 and impurities, it becomes interchangeable with fossil natural gas, so it can be used for every purpose fossil gas is used for, including powering heavy-duty vehicles. And then into the future, a lot of activity and research and excitement around its use as what we would call a biointermediate to make things like renewable jet fuel or SAF or biomethanol, things of that nature. So highly versatile. Can't overemphasize enough the importance of the oil and gas measures, and this is from the report just highlighting in comparison to different measures that are on the books and opportunities to deploy digesters, doing the oil and gas, NSPS, new source performance standards is key, and that's really the lowest hanging fruit in terms of cost effectiveness. But all of these different digester type strategies are quite compelling on a cost effectiveness basis and far more sort of cost effective than going after things like plugging oil and gas wells that are abandoned, for example. And for this audience, of course, the role of government is critical. I would say it's really the combination of a couple of policies and programs on the books that have driven the growth that you saw a couple slides ago, this nearly 10x growth in deployment of this infrastructure. Renewable fuel standard, first and foremost, has been a major driving force in allowing for sort of market access and compelling economics. More recently, of course, the Inflation Reduction Act has a number of components that relate to digesters and the energy outputs. And so that's driven a lot of recent growth and investment in this infrastructure and certainly attracted billions in private capital to date, but again, could attract significantly more. And I think there are a number of items that Kevin and Suzanne will get into in more detail around some of the gaps, some of the challenges, including on these programs that exist. So with the RFS, for example, a number of potential new pathways to utilize the methane from these systems, but there's uncertainty, there's sort of lack of clarity on whether these pathways and projects will get approval. And similarly on the IRA, still a lack of guidance and clarity on things like 45Z and 45V, so hydrogen and clean fuel production credit. And so we hear from investors and industry often that they're lining up to deploy money. We heard from a developer last week, said we have $1 billion committed to building 4 food waste digesters. The reality is it's going to take us 3 to 5 years to build these systems, and without greater certainty, greater clarity beyond the timeframes that are currently, in place under IRA in particular, it's going to be challenging for us to make good on these commitments and promises. So consistent theme is more clarity, better guidance from federal government in allowing the private sector to utilize its expertise to deploy this existing technology and to deploy money.
I was asked to talk a bit about how Generate Upcycle is helping with this biogenic methane challenge. We are probably the largest, one of the largest food waste recyclers in North America. We also have advanced wastewater facilities that we're building. We also have a fleet of composting facilities, but I'm going to focus quite a bit on our food waste anaerobic digestion fleet. We're talking about infrastructure. This is huge amounts of capital. Matt was talking about 3 to 6 years to develop a project. That's just to develop the project. Then, you're going to hopefully operate it for 10 to 30 years. You might have a 10 plus year payback. So to have the policy rug, regulatory rug ripped out from under you as an infrastructure developer, as an infrastructure investor is exactly what we don't want. Generate upcycle, we're talking for a food waste digester, high solids digester in the United States, somewhere in the range of hundreds of millions of dollars to build this infrastructure. So your risk, your payback period, everything is orders of magnitude bigger. And so, we have this huge opportunity, as Energy Vision has demonstrated, to build out this infrastructure. But every single project is so much work that a dedicated team has to put in to make it work. It's a tragedy that 40% of food in America is wasted and the vast majority ends up in landfills and then it starts leaking as methane into the atmosphere. But we're also losing a huge amount of value in nutrients. And the war in Ukraine has taught us how valuable fertilizer is. And hopefully you guys learned how impactful and how greenhouse gas intensive conventional fertilizer is. So when food is going to a landfill, we are losing forever all of the nutrition in that food, all the nutrients that we could be using as recycled fertilizer. We're losing all the water. Food is 45 to 95% water. When you eat an apple core and hopefully recycle it, that apple core is 80% water. So we need to build these upcycling facilities near where the people are, near where the food waste is, near where food manufacturing is. You don't want to be trucking water hundreds of miles to a landfill. And we're also wasting the energy if it ends up in a landfill. On an annual basis, we recycle over 1 billion tons of organic waste in the United States and over 600 million tons in the UK. One of the things that we talk a lot about at Energy Vision and in the climate community is about just how renewable energy resources are distributed. So we have this huge opportunity to democratize energy and increase inclusiveness and help communities be more self-reliant and resilient. I was asked to talk about the challenges we face in building this infrastructure and operating it and financing it. My colleague, John Danan, and at Generate Capital, and I wrote a white paper at the request of some of our colleagues in the California government. So you'll see some California-specific recommendations here. But I pulled this summary table from our white paper in the hopes that you guys would be curious enough to download it. Finding sites is really difficult. So if you need to be near population centers, that means your real estate is expensive and there aren't that many sites that are zoned industrial, that have the electrical service you need, maybe the gas, water hookups that you need, utilities, permitting. As a waste recycling facility or upcycling facility, depending on where you are, you might need various specialized state permits. You've got zoning issues. You might have air, water, waste permits. Getting any one of them can be incredibly time consuming, can be a multi-year, multi-million-dollar process. And we have to get all of them all at the same time. Feedstock. The success of any recycling facility, whether it's anaerobic digestion, compost, et cetera, you have to have enough feedstock. And with food waste, there's a lot of challenges with getting feedstock that isn't contaminated with plastics and all kinds of things. So feedstock availability, and there's a lot that public policymakers can do to help us get better access to feedstock, to enable long-term contracts with municipalities for their curbside organics, those kinds of things. Because food waste is has such a high water content, when you're done recycling it, you're left with this nutrient-rich water, which we call digestate, which is this wonderful resource, especially as the Congressman was saying, in areas like California, where water is so scarce and so valuable. Digestate can be this wonderful, wonderful resource. But we need more R&D to figure out how to put it in a form that's more easily transportable. We need to study, get the nutrient balances right for particular crops. So there's just a ton of work we could be doing on maximizing the value and utility of the digestate. Workforce. This is a non-trivial issue. We talk about good jobs, clean jobs, green energy jobs, but we need a highly skilled workforce to be able to operate the depackaging machines. When we get 18-wheelers of expired yogurt, it has to be depackaged before we can recycle it. When we get 18-wheelers of, I was going to throw out a name, so let me make it generic, of expired alcoholic beverages or they were off spec or something. We'll get these, truck after truckload of these things that have to be depackaged, whether it's glass, aluminum. So we have to have specialized equipment and really skilled folks to operate all of this equipment, the engineering, the design, all of it. So we've actually had to do a lot of on the job training, and would love to see things like tax credits for on the job retraining of oil and gas industry workers to work in this industry, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking, like, if you ever have the opportunity to go to Denmark and experience their industry, they are on track to displace all of their fossil gas in their gas network with renewable gas. I mean, this industry can scale. Germany has over 10,000 digesters producing a huge amount of gas. There's been a big push since the war in Ukraine. Just encourage everyone to focus on the CI scores and the best available science to make sure we get those right, because it really matters to the valuation of the fuel.
Well, thank you, and I really, really appreciate the opportunity to share what we've been doing in California. The permitting process in California, it can take years and cost millions of dollars just to get the approval to move the first shovelful of dirt. So I'm Kevin Abernathy, and I'm with the Milk Producers Council. We got 238 projects that are currently on the books. We have 129 large. The average dairy farm in California, as Jim mentioned, starts around 1,400 cows and goes up to 10,000. And if you add the support stock, there's another 10,000. So we do have farms that have approximately 20,000 noses that is going to a digester. I highlight this. This is in Jim's district. This is our fueling station that's associated with all of our feed and commodities that are going back out to dairies, which is the Moo-Chew going into the north end of the cow. And then here's I mentioned BMW and the partnership with Bar 20 Dairy. We're actually fueling the ports in SoCal. Of course, the picture says 1,000 words, homes. And here it is, guys. This is on a California dairy farm. This is H2B2 and our hydrogen fueling station for Fresno Metro Transit. So we're in the process of creating the cow-powered hydrogen highway, starting in our Kern cluster and working our way north. We took excess gas that we weren't being able to utilize due to power purchase agreements and infrastructure connections. And we took that extra gas and we actually have created California's first hydrogen fueling station from CalPower. The projects that we've currently got, about 2.4 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, 24 million metric tons over 10 years. California dairy farms are powering 15,000 vehicles a day. I referred to the 500,000 removal of gasoline cars. We are well into meeting our commitments, which in California is called SB 1383, on 20% of the greenhouse gas reductions from all the climate programs. And let me say this again. The California dairy industry is not only meeting, but exceeding at the most cost-effective rate of any program that California has developed through putting in anaerobic digesters and creating renewable transportation fuel and electrons, period. Nobody even can see the buggy because we're so far in front of them. From the California perspective, grant funding, we also developed the low carbon fuel standard, the RNG, and then the cap and trade offsets and the biomat for on-farm power generation. The partnership has created hundreds of millions of capital and billions annually to create what we've got as a paradigm for the world to look at. When we get more on the federal side, the investment tax credit gives us the ability to provide 30-40% on the domestic content. But here's another note here. Projects need to start before 12/31 to 24. That's a few months in front of us, guys. Again, back to the comment on time. We need time. Second part, ongoing incentives on the Inflation Reduction Act programs have a potential to provide some long-term incentives I'll run through these real quick. Dairy participation in 45E is critical. Extend the ITC start construction past 12/31 of 2024. Avoided methane. And I say this is a key phrase, avoided methane. When you look at it as far as the historical precedent on the dairy when it comes to anaerobic digesters, we've got to have that to get our CI score, which directly correlates into the monetization of our potential product depending on the pathway. All of you in leadership roles are going to have to stay the course based on the reality and the science of what we've been able to accomplish. And you've heard a lot of it, what's been done with this group and others. The science has proven time and time again that this is a reliable mechanism to accomplish great things for all of us in society as a cumulative whole, period, end of story. It's not circumstance, it's not perception, it's fact. Private capital and government programs, incentive-based programs, the carrot rather than the stick, works exceptionally well. California has proven that. Direct regulation will absolutely stymie a multi-billion-dollar investment that we've got in California.
But in the last decade, I think the level of understanding and expertise at the utilities overall has grown substantially. And certainly there are a number of these utilities that recognize the important role that they can play near term in decarbonizing the economy and decarbonizing their systems. So I would say things are trending in the right direction.
You're in a situation where we prevented so much methane from going into the atmosphere because we were able to capture it and use it, and we couldn't have used that methane for anything else. That's a huge win. And so there are a lot of situations, I think, when this kind of captured methane can be really important and add a lot to our energy resources.
But out in the real world, we operate in systems. We have the food systems and the energy systems and water systems, and they're all interconnected. And so we should be looking for opportunities where these guys are dealing with a lack of water. These guys are dealing with waste. Where can we bring these things together and do demonstration projects where we use the digestate to help slow desertification of marginal lands that have been degraded? And how do we reestablish prairie and use some of the biomass to feed the digester? And so that we are absolutely optimizing the use of public funds and these systems so that we destroy every molecule of methane we possibly can, and we produce as much distributed renewable energy as we possibly can to displace as much fossil energy as we can, and we save taxpayers money. So in the process,
Don't become encumbered by the difficulty. Just take a step and start moving forward, and things will come together. And stay extremely focused on your vision. Stay flexible, and we will get there. But it's gonna take a very, very strong will to continue moving forward. But you got to start.